Welcome to the Way of the Lion Apologetics course. This course is derived from my Master of Theology dissertation of the same name. The concept is that each of the Chronicles of Narnia contains a special message for Christian witnesses to apologetic typologies, that is, people who share certain elements of worldview. I've chosen to follow the published order of books rather than the chronological reading order. Initially, this was to chart Lewis's progression of thought, but it has the added merit of starting with the best-known books first. The most famous book of all is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which is the text before us here. This will be followed by the Caspian trilogy, and then the lesser-known three. Each book will be split into 3 sections, each with a 15-minute talk, followed by an activity. These can be engaged with in the comment section. There will also be some homework at the end of each book. I am a teacher, and one of the things we do to ensure that learning is taking place is to set learning aims, which are reviewed at the end of the lesson. This session's learning aims are: understand what apologetics is, understand what truth claims are, and be able to assess truth claims. Let's start with what is apologetics. The apologist, William Lane Craig, likes to say that apologetics is not saying sorry that you're a Christian, but rather making others sorry you are a Christian. That is, of course, his little joke. It comes from the Greek word apologia, which means defense. Christian apologetics, therefore, is mounting a defense of the Christian faith. This can be done in a few ways, such as historically, philosophically, scientifically, and personally. Our aim is to give you the basic tools you need to start to defend your faith from attack. The result of this should be a stronger personal faith and an improved ability to witness with boldness and confidence. Perhaps the best description of apologetics comes in 1 Peter 3:15-16. But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behaviour in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. C.S. Lewis is one of the most quoted Christian writers in history. He had a gift for taking very complex issues and phrasing them in ways that we can all relate to. In the 1950s, he wrote a series of children's books, which have had an enormous impact on generations of readers and listeners. A lot of people have guessed about what subtext there might be to these fairy stories, including Shakespeare and 7 Deadly Sins. There are several very interesting books in the field of Narniology, and I'm going to give you a very brief rundown now. The first place to start are the 7 original texts. I recommend reading the appropriate text the week before each session. They are short, fun, and easy to read, but hold a hidden depth which you might not previously have seen. I would urge you to read them and not to watch the films, since too much artistic license has robbed the newest productions of much of the nuance. Voyage of the Dawn Treader is the worst. The Way of the Lion. This course is based on my master's dissertation, which is available on Amazon Kindle or for free on academia.edu. The basic thesis is that each book contains clues to techniques one could use in an apologetic conversation with various typologies. I will leave you to judge whether my thesis holds water or not. I passed my dissertation with 62%, so I guess it might be worth reading. Not as worth reading as that by Michael Ward. Michael Ward sparked a Copernican revolution in Narniology with his PhD thesis, which is popularly published as Planet Narnia, or even more popularly as the Narnia Code, which was also made into a documentary. He noticed that each book holds an astrological theme, which was common in the medieval literature of which Lewis was a scholar, but virtually extinct in modern writing. He then went back through the books and Lewis's other works, such as The Discarded Image, and presented compelling evidence supporting his thesis. Worth a read to understand the intricate nature of composition and thus appreciate Lewis's genius. One of the books I used most for my dissertation was this collection of essays relating to different Narnian issues to the area of philosophy. I will be touching on some of these insights over the next 7 sessions, 7 books, but this is a good, slightly more technical treatment. One of the best biographies of Lewis is Alistair McGrath's C.S. Lewis, A Life. It's very, very good. There are, of course, many other books. These are some of the books that I used for my dissertation. Important among them, Catherine Linskog's Journey into Narnia, Ford's Companion to Narnia, and Rowan Williams' The Lion's World, which I critique ungenerously in the Horse and His Boy section. If you are interested in further study, these are a good starting point. Truth claims. We are inundated daily by a plethora of truth claims. That is, a hypothesis not yet verified by personal experience. For example, I believe the world is round, because the evidence, namely the witness of the entire astrophysics community who have done extensive research, points towards that conclusion. It also makes sense of the world which we see around us. I don't believe in unicorns, since the evidence we should expect to find for them, such as reliable and concurring reports, is lacking. Some claims we accept, and some we reject. It's important for us to be able to discern between these claims and also to assess the claims we make to others. Lewis shows this need in his threshold text. The repeated theme of being at a threshold is a significant aspect of Lion. Michael Ward suggests that Lion's imagery is based on Jupiter or Jove and points to Lewis's poem, The Planets, to evidence this. The poem of wrath ended and woes mended, of winter past and guilt forgiven, and good fortune, Jove is master. These are all images found at the threshold of Christianity, the end of some things, such as wrath and winter, and the beginning of others, such as a guilt-free, blessed life, are often the very promises which mean most to a new convert. Ward describes it as a brilliant 4-line summation of the plot of Lion. McGrath notes that for Lewis, human experience suggests that there is another, more wonderful world in which our true destiny lies. Lion starts at the threshold of the professor's front door, where the children first meet this odd-looking old man whom they liked almost at once. In the same opening chapter, Lucy finds a doorway to a new world. This threshold motif seems to usher characters and readers alike into the world Lewis clearly believed we are destined for. Lewis does this with the strongest weapon in his arsenal, the gospel. The picture on the screen, by the way, is Lewis's own wardrobe. It is believed that this was the inspiration for the wardrobe in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. The first child to discover Narnia is, of course, Lucy, the indisputable heroine of the series, appearing in 5 of the 7 books and barely ever setting a foot wrong. She was probably named for Lucy Barfield, Lewis's goddaughter and dedicatee of the book. She famously meets Mr. Tumnus the Faun, carrying presents under a lamppost, the image which sparked the whole venture for Lewis. Tumnus presents various truth claims. 1. It is always winter and never Christmas. 2. Because of the White Witch claiming to be Queen of Narnia. And 3. That he is a kidnapper for her. Lucy reacts to this with a childlike faith. "No," said Lucy, "I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of the sort." And then the reader falls in love with this little girl as she says, "Well," said Lucy, rather slowly, for she wanted to be truthful and yet not too hard on him. "Well, that was pretty bad, but you're so sorry for it that I'm sure you'll never do it again." At great personal risk to himself, Mr. Tumnus takes Lucy back to where he found her, and Lucy returns to tell her siblings. The second visitor was the undisputed villain of the piece, the character Lewis uses to personify the fallen state of man, Edmund. Edmund meets Jadis, the White Witch, who claims an alternative set of truth claims. 1. She is queen. 2. She is kind. And 3. She will make him a prince. It's worth noting that Jadis in this scene acts very much as the devil in both Adam's, that's Genesis 3, and Christ's temptations, that's Luke 4, offering food and power to sway him to her will. Like Adam, unlike Jesus, Edmund fell for it, and he accepted everything she said on the promise of Turkish delight and power. The depth of his betrayal comes later, when he leaves his family to betray them to Jadis. Lucy accepts all that Tumnus says on friendship, the basis of its correspondence to the real world she is experiencing, and the criterion of embarrassment. Edmund accepts all that he hears, despite evidence to the contrary, on the promise of sweets and power. Lewis sets up a dichotomy of truth statements, one to Lucy from Mr. Tumnus and the other to Edmund from the White Witch. He showed that believing the wrong truth claim and being swayed by other considerations than truth, such as Turkish delight, can have disastrous consequences. Even the repeated identification of sons of Adam and daughters of Eve hint at the fallen state of man. Edmund embodies it. However else they may differ, all commentaries of Lyon agree that on the fundamental role of Edmund. Lindskog views it as a narrative from Frozen to Thord, citing Edmund's first feeling sorry for a creature other than himself when the witch turns a party to stone. Luther White sees Edmund as a transition device from old ways to new life. Davis observes an extreme makeover in Edmund's moral growth. An understanding of one's own moral corruption is essential in Lewis's apologetic. In Mere Christianity, he says, "Christianity tells people to repent and promises them forgiveness. It therefore has nothing, as far as I know, to say to people who do not know that they have done anything to repent of and who do not feel that they need any forgiveness." Lewis's dichotomy was useful in the 1950s, but maybe less so today. To understand why, we need to look at the history of philosophy, starting from the Enlightenment. Many of you will have heard of Descartes and his famous motto, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. Descartes, like Locke and Kant, began thinking from point zero, and thus by doubting everything. Though Descartes was a Christian and did great work in trying to prove God, his legacy was actually fundamental nihilistic doubt. This opened the way for the likes of Nietzsche, Marx, Freud and Darwin to challenge truth claims, according to an article in the Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society, that's JETS. The problem with the Enlightenment was the total imposition of the scientific model of rationality upon all truth. The claim that only scientific data can be objectively understood, objectively defined, and objectively defended. Lewis was writing at the tail end of a period we call modernity. The central tenets of modernity, such as the inexorable march of progress and the salvation by technology, think of Cybermen, had been roundly refuted by the events of the Second World War. Thus, the 1960s and 70s gave birth to post-modernity, which deconstructs truth, kills the meta-narrative, or big ideas, robs all text of meaning, incubates hedonism, undermines authority, and displaces morality. This was foreseen by Nietzsche. There will be wars, such as there have never been on Earth before, as a result of the inevitable nihilism experienced at the demise of theism. Of course, there is nothing new under the sun, to quote the teacher. Name the book. Put your answer in the comments. The first postmodernist was Pontius Pilate. John 18:33. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did others talk to you about me?" Here Jesus is teaching us that in pursuit of truth, intent is prior to content. When in a conversation with someone is asking questions, it is not always bad to respond with another question to ascertain their motives. Verse 35. "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you've done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now, my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Jesus was not merely establishing the existence of truth, but his pristine embodiment of it. He was identical with the truth. This meant that everything he said and did, and the life he lived in the flesh, represented that which was in keeping with ultimate reality. And therefore, to reject him is to choose to govern oneself with a lie. Verse 38. "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." Finally, notice that Pilate didn't even wait for a response. He was not a seeker after truth. I suggest and hope that we are coming out of this dark age of anti-intellectual, self-refuting craziness. But the generation that we will be witnessing to, for the next couple of decades at least, will be infected with it. There are 4 points to be clear on when presenting and assessing truth claims. 1. All truth claims are exclusive. 2 plus 2 equals 4 at the exclusion of 3 and 5. Anyone who tries to tell you that Christianity is exclusive and thus wrong is basing his objection on a truth claim which by its nature is exclusive. Namely, that exclusivity is wrong. It excludes all world religions and modes of thought. Once that is established, you can start testing their truth claim against yours using the same criteria. What criteria? I'm glad you asked. 2. Authority. All things are believed on authority, be it on the authority of scientists or theologians or ancient texts or your mother. Every truth claim can be measured against authority. Here, a basic knowledge of how the Bible came to us can be very useful. 3. Explanatory power and scope. If something only explains a section of the evidence by ignoring the rest of it, then it lacks explanatory scope. If it explains something badly, then it lacks power. God remains the best explanation for existence, fine-tuning, objective moral values, and the experience of billions of people around the world and throughout the ages. 4. Person relative. The last point is mainly cautionary. Remember that all evidence is person relative. I know this sounds a bit postmodern and we are the authors of our own realities, but the most compelling case will not cause what Richard Dawkins calls a dyed-in-the-wool faithhead, such as himself, to reassess their worldview. He exemplifies this in an interview by granting that intelligent design is possible, but only if it were aliens who did it, who first came through Darwinian evolution. For someone like that, no amount of argumentation or evidence will be useful. Rather like the man who was convinced he was dead. There are a few different types of truth to be aware of. We'll call 3 of these correspondence, coherence, and pragmatism. Other possible terms exist, which I will try to include for you to put in your notes to help you understand. Correspondence. If a proposition, that is, a truth claim, corresponds to reality, then it is true. If I say, "It is snowing," then this statement is true or false, depending on whether it corresponds to the actual weather conditions at the time of speaking. We say it is the state of affairs that obtains. This is objective truth. For example, both Lucy and Edmund had sufficient evidence to assess the truths that had been presented to them. In defending the Christian faith, it is important to have a command of real world verifiable facts which a seeker can use. Knowing of the Rylands manuscript, or any of the 5,200 plus manuscripts we have, can be enough to silence many of the poorly reasoned arguments against the historicity of the Bible. The claim of the gospel is an experiential claim which can be verified by anyone seeking truth by appealing to Christ personally. But as with Lucy and Edmund, these claims will be tested if the medium is one of relationship. Coherence. The coherence view of truth is also called contingent, since it is based upon other things that we know to be fact. This is the basis of propositional logic. We can build a valid case for God's existence with neat formulae, such as employed by William Lane Craig. For example, the Kalam cosmological argument from Al-Ghazali. Everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, either in the necessity of its own nature or in an eternal cause. If the universe has an explanation of its existence, that explanation is God. The universe exists. Therefore, the universe has an explanation of its existence from 1 and 3. Therefore, the explanation of God's existence is the universe's existence is God from 2 and 4. Put more simply, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. Or his moral argument: if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore God exists. The problem you will encounter with this model of truth is postmodern relativism again. Also, a pervasive spirit of ignorance and anti-intellectualism characterizes this age, and thus you may find you have to build a foundation before constructing a case. If you are presented with a truth claim that seems to go against the Christian faith, measuring it against the standards of correspondence and coherence can usually dispel it. The easy example is the old attack on the Bible that we've all heard. The Bible is a translation of a translation of a translation. Why should we take it seriously? Here, a working knowledge of biblical transmission is helpful. If you can show people that the Bible is translated from original texts each time, the objection can be shown to neither correspond to reality nor cohere with real events. That can move the discussion on to more interesting matters quite quickly. Pragmatism is the idea that truth is whatever is most useful to oneself or society. This is subjective truth, the place where someone can rightly say, that's true for you, but not for me. Of course, there are areas where that is legitimate, such as West Ham being the best football team, and that's true for me, but not for my Notts Forest supporting cousins. Strawberry cheesecake is clearly the best flavour of ice cream, unless you prefer mint choc chip. Return of the Jedi is the best Star Wars film, unless you prefer Jar Jar Binks in Phantom Menace. Okay, that one was a joke. This can be measured on personal preference. The problem starts when people claim it has some bearing on objective, historical, scientific, or logical fact. Imagine someone claiming the boiling point of water as pragmatic. The law courts would be overrun with opportunists spilling tepid water on themselves and claiming that they had been scolded because their boiling point is 25 degrees C and not 100 degrees, as everywhere else. Or refusing to acknowledge the existence of Auschwitz because the Holocaust didn't happen for them. Or denying that Jesus claims to be God despite his claims to be able to forgive sins, which only God can do. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. Because the laws of logic don't apply in their world. We live in a world where people apply pragmatism to all sorts of truth that they shouldn't. Morality is subjective, making all things permissible. History is subjective, making uncomfortable events disappear. Science is subjective, making inconvenient evidence disappear. In this world, people are floundering for meaning, purpose, and a solid rock on which to build their lives. When they can't find it, they kill themselves. We can reduce that risk simply by introducing them to the Rock of Ages himself. There is a fourth and final truth that we should know about. Ultimate or absolute truth exists only in the mind of God. All other truths are but shadows of this form of truth. To go all Platonic on you, we, down here in the Shadowlands, are trying to show people that there is another world of light from whence the shadows are cast, and they too can venture out of the cave and experience the one who claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. And now it's time for an activity. I'm going to put up some truth claims, and I would like you to refute these truth claims by applying the tests of correspondence and coherence. I would like you to do this by placing your comments in the comment section below each slide. And pause. Having unpaused, I will address this. Jesus never existed. He was just a fusion of ancient, dying and rising pagan gods and god myths like Horus and Mithras. Look at the correspondence. Historical references to Jesus by Josephus, Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, and even the Talmud make this unrealistic. Let's look at the coherence. The historicity of notable comparatives of Horus and Mithras myths date later than Christian, some as late as the 1800s. It's a bit silly. Jesus was declared God at the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, when Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Press pause. Correspondence. Abject nonsense. This is the view popularised by Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code. Dan Brown is a first-rate tourist, a second-rate novelist, and a third-rate historian. Real historians laugh at this claim, since the question of Jesus' deity didn't arise at Nicaea. It was a council to discuss the Arian heresy. Coherence. We know from Tacitus and Pliny around 100 AD that Jesus was worshipped as God in Rome, and that he received worship in the Bible, notably from Thomas. It doesn't matter what you believe, so long as you are devout. Press pause. Coherence. This makes no sense at all. If you're doing science, it matters what you believe to make sense of the outcomes. If you're baking a cake, it matters that you believe Mary Berry's instructions. Correspondence. A devout believer in Mary Berry is not going to produce a decent cake if they layer meat and pasta in a dish. So unless you want to give your child a birthday lasagna instead of a cake, it does matter what you believe. There is no absolute truth. Press pause. There is, of course, an easy refutation here. Are you absolutely sure about that? Coherence. This is a truth statement, and thus refutes itself. If there is no absolute truth, then on what grounds do you assert that there is no absolute truth? Correspondence. Try to live as if there is no truth. Red man means don't walk. That may be your truth, but my truth is splat! Man can't fly. That's your truth, so you stay on the cliff. But this is not absolute, so I'm going to spread my wings and splat. Morals are relative. Let's pause and discuss. This is a trickier one. I've even heard Christians affirm this. It almost coheres if we take the view that we are the authors of our own reality. It gives rise to statements such as Christians are on the wrong side of history with gay marriage. Of course, this claims to know more than we can, notably the direction of history, which is rarely predictable. It relies on certain assumptions, and it is these that do not correspond to reality. Correspondence. If morals are relative, then we have no grounds for righteous indignation at child abuse, genocide, or wearing sandals and socks. I guess. But if you reduce morals to the level of taste and fashion, then this is the level you reach. This cannot be lived out in the real world. The only statements that are either true or false are those that can be tested by the natural sciences. Let's pause and discuss. This is an argument we will discuss in more depth in week 6 with Magician's Nephew. The easy rebuttal is that statement scientifically testable? Coherence. The easy rebuttal shows that this is not coherent, despite being very popular. This is similar to Hawking's bold statement, "Philosophy is dead," at the beginning of a 400-page book of philosophy. He was slammed by Oxbridge philosophy professors for such a silly statement. It is internally self-refuting. Correspondence. This also doesn't correspond to the external world of the speaker's life. Imagine a world where every statement had to be held to scientific scrutiny. sunset. No, the light of the sun is glancing through the atmosphere as the Earth completes its rotation, which evokes certain synapses to release chemicals in my brain associated with pleasure, whatever pleasure is. Science says nothing about philosophy, morality, aesthetics, use of science, or the supernatural. Thank you for joining me in this first part of the Way of the Lion Apologetics course. I hope that at the end of this session you feel that you understand what apologetics is, understand what truth claims are, and are able to assess truth claims. If you have any comments or questions, then put them in the comment section below. If you found this helpful or interesting, then please like and share. If you would like to see the next part of this course, then be sure to subscribe and click the bell to be notified of part 2.